The class this year is as weak as it's been, to just be blunt. Next year, though, seems to have a little bit more promise. When you look at NFLDraftBuzz.com is a neat website.
It is.
It's a very neat website. And on the 13th of January, they updated their 26 quarterback class, and they've got Arch Manning at number one overall. Nico Iamaleava at number 4 overall. The overall, by the way, is an average overall ranking of multiple ranking services out there. And then the third quarterback on the board is a kid named LaNorris Sellers, and he is the 25th average overall ranking. Behind Sellers is a guy who falls over when you push him, Garrett Nussmeier. Jelon Daniels, the quarterback at Kansas, at number 5. Drew Allar at 6. Sam Levitt at 7. Jackson Arnold at 8. Miller Moss at 9. And Carson Beck at 10. Cade Klubnik, Connor Wegman. That's the 12. Okay. How about this? Let's start with something a little bit far-fetched and fun. If LaNorris Sellers, all right, let's go all three, the top three there. Manning, Iamaleava, Sellers. If those three were eligible for the draft this year in 25, where do you think those guys would land based on current production, what they've done thus far in college, which quite frankly isn't much between the three of them if you actually add it up, but then also trajectory, like what they would be projected to do at the next level?
So you're saying if they were in this draft,
yes,
with Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, well, they'd clearly be behind those two. Mm-hmm. Although Arch, the love affair for Arch, I shouldn't say that quickly. If you would just go on upside, somebody might go Arch. But if you're just going on production, as you mentioned, they haven't done enough to be in the same category as those three guys, really, if you included Jackson Dart.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I would, if I was the agent for any of those three and they were draft eligible and they were considering going, I would say no. You need another year.
Okay,
you're doing a fiscally irresponsible thing, leaving now when you're not nearly going to get top dollar for your talents. If you have another year to improve on all these things, well, now you can break bank and be a top 10 pick and get legit money. None of those guys this year would have gotten that.
Yeah, and see where you're coming at that answer from draft analyst mode. What is best for the player? A lot of people won't think about it that way. A lot of people are just thinking about it based on pure talent and then projectability, right? Like if you, to be quite frank, of those three, we've seen all of them play. And this is going to come off as very, very homerish. But if you said today, okay, well, you can have one of those three, I'm going to personally take LaNorris Sellers. But I've also watched him play much more football than I've watched the other two guys play, number one. Number two, I like the fact that he can do two different things. He can beat you in a lot of different ways, but he's got some things to work on. They all have things to work on, clearly. And you're 100%, I'm with you. If they were eligible, I'd be like, no, why don't you stay? You'll make more money by staying. But if they were in this class, and that's who you had to pick from, my gut tells me that of those that are available in this year's draft class at the quarterback position, Sanders, Ward, they're going to be the first two gone. But then you got Ewers, Beck, Milroe, Gabriel. Dart is going to continue to move up. I think Dart would go ahead of them. I'm not so sure any of the other guys in this class. Oh, Beck's not in it, but any of the other guys in this group would go ahead of LaNorris Sellers or Arch Manning. I wouldn't say that for Iamaleava, but I think those two guys would go ahead of all the others.
Yeah, I mean, Nico, I was a little surprised because I also look at that site and I saw this list. I guess it was yesterday, and I saw Nico, and I'm like, man, tape was not good to Nico last year. Tape was not good, and they look at a lot of tape. So, yeah. I mean, I'll be very curious to see. All three of them need to make strides. Okay, they just do, for what the NFL looks for in particular. They all three can improve on things in the passing game. That's without question.
Just out of curiosity, so LaNorris Sellers clocked at a 4.6240. Okay, 4.6240.
Mm-hmm.
LaNorris Sellers, though, also we have seen him become a magician when it comes to avoiding sacks and all the things, right?
Yeah.
So two different conversations there, but strictly based on the 40 time, I did not realize Arch Manning also ran a 4.6240. Did you?
I knew it was good because that was part of the hype on Arch, and that don't confuse him with Eli, don't confuse him with Peyton. Like, Arch is a true athlete playing quarterback, so I knew that he had the reputation coming out of high school. Not whether or not I would have guessed 4.6, but here's the thing: the 40 time is I mean, LaNorris is clearly a better runner than those two. I don't care if he runs a 4.8 at the combine. If you're trying to tackle LaNorris Sellers, if you're a defensive end and you've got him in the crosshairs, I would much rather, as a defensive end, try to bring Arch Manning and Nico to the ground than LaNorris. Because LaNorris, it's not just the 40 time. He's got wiggle. He's got quick twitch. I mean, he looks a little bit like Lamar when it comes to escapability. So I think all the scouts will see that. They'll look at the 4.6 and go, yeah, 4.6, but he in terms of getting out of the pocket and being a nightmare to tackle in the open field, he's better than a 4.6. Wow. That's not where LaNorris' running is already elite. To use a baseball draft analogy, Jamie, I know you'll appreciate this. He's plus, okay, which is the highest ranking you can get, right?
Right.
Talk about a guy's speed or his hitting, his power. There's regular, there's plus, and there's plus, which is elite of elite. That's LaNorris. Where LaNorris is going to either make money or not make money is based on his throwing. 100%.
Right.
100%. I was reading a thing on top transfer wide receivers in the SEC today, but from Connor O'Gara. And there's a lot of really good ones. He listed 10. None of those are going to South Carolina. And that's not to say South Carolina doesn't have talent at the position. We went over this last week as well. I just hope somebody emerges as like just a stud to help LaNorris out, because I think he's going to need some help. I think he's good at, like all quarterbacks. You need a guy that is going to win those 50-50 balls. As we've said before, like with Alshon Jeffrey, it was never a 50-50 ball. It was like a 90-10. If you threw it in his vicinity, he was coming away with it. What a luxury that is for a quarterback to do, where you can throw it to a guy who's kind of covered and he's still going to adjust and make the play. I don't know if that guy exists this year. Hopefully one will emerge, but that would be awfully helpful. But yeah, I mean, so like you mentioned the site. I did this last week with somebody. Who was I talking about? With Kennard. Because I'm sure for a lot of people that aren't draft nicks, like how could that dude not be a first rounder?
Right.
And so much of it just comes down simply to 40 time. That they're really big on that for rush ends, more so with quarterbacks. But you look at tape and you're like, well, the guy beat everybody he faced like a drum in the SEC. How can he not be a first-round pick? But chances are he's not going to be. So if you read this, strengths on LaNorris: good zip and ball placement on the quick slant.
Yep.
Possesses a nice combination of size, athleticism, arm strength. Sells ball fakes effectively. Effortless thrower with very good arm strength to make passes downfield.
Yeah.
Most of his time, he is at ease mentally in the pocket. He's willing to stand in and absorb hits while making a throw. Has plus arm strength. And from a physical standpoint, a prototypical modern quarterback, his arm strength is very good, with a fairly quick delivery and the velocity and accuracy to make window throws at intermediate levels. Now, the weaknesses. Sellers often plays out of control. His mechanics are sloppy, particularly his footwork, and his decision-making is suspect. Too often fails to give receivers a chance to make play after the catch. High completion percentage padded by many quick screens. Sellers often holds the ball too long. While Sellers keeps his eyes up while moving, his mechanics get increasingly sloppy once he's pushed off his spot. It doesn't mention the fumbles on there, by the way, which makes me wonder how much tape did they see. But that's like I could easily go to Arch Manning and there's going to be critiques. It's like you can't be overly sensitive when you start breaking these guys down in terms of the way the NFL looks at it. They are going to poke holes in everybody. Josh Allen had them. Patrick Mahomes had them. Joe Burrow had them. Like nobody just got a perfect score in terms of evaluating them.
Yeah. So because I've got the same thing pulled up where they said he often plays out of control. His mechanics are sloppy. You almost wonder if that is referencing some of the loose ball stuff that happened to him this year a little bit. But number two, I think first of all, whether anybody agrees or disagrees with anything that is written about LaNorris Sellers when it comes to his weaknesses is really irrelevant. Like that's the way that these things here are the things that guys like Mike Shula are focusing on because he understands it from an NFL standpoint. He was in this is what he did. He was a part of the draft process. He was a part of finding a quarterback. He was a part of developing quarterbacks at the NFL level. I mean, you mentioned Josh Allen just a little bit ago, obviously Cam Newton and so many others that he's worked with. He's worked with so many different quarterbacks who have so many different strengths and so many different weaknesses. And not only is he able to identify them himself, but from a draft standpoint, he's able to speak to those who will communicate with Mike Shula. Hey, look, this is what they're saying that you need to work on. Now, does all of that mean that is the only focus? I mean, clearly the focus for LaNorris Sellers is how do they help the Gamecocks win football games.
Yeah.
That's the main focus. But also like they do intertwine. Like if these things are good, clearly that's going to help you win games. Sometimes you might have to let your guard down. You might have to be a little sloppy just to make a play or two. That's understandable. But overall, as a prospect and as a player, if those are the things, if that's the feedback on you, you have a coach that is able to relay the message in a way that makes sense. Hey, look, I've been there. I know what they're saying. I can specifically go to this play in the third quarter of this game, and that is what they're talking about. And
100%.
What I mean, that is invaluable, man, to LaNorris Sellers.
No, it is. And I'll say this too. Doing the Carolina Panther preseason games, I did it for 5 years. So for basically, I would go to mini camp every year in April, and then I would just basically camp out in Spartanburg for about a month. And for 4 of those 5 years was Cam Newton, and Mike Shula, of course, was there for much of that as well. Cam Newton physically was gifted with an amazing skill set, but nobody ever accused Cam Newton of having the hardest work ethic or the maturity. Like, I think Cam could have been so much better. I know, like, Cam was obviously good, but he could have been a lot better. I know people close to that organization, both back then and still today, that'll tell you the exact same thing. That's not going to be an issue with LaNorris Sellers in terms of work ethic, attitude, maturity.
No.
He has all those intangibles. Like, he'll go into a room. I can tell you right now, the Panthers were hoping Andrew Luck did not go back for his senior year at Stanford because they were going to take Andrew Luck over Cam. That was going to be the pick. There were a lot of questions about Cam. Cam didn't exactly light up the interview room. LaNorris Sellers would. That's the difference. That's the difference. But Cam coming out of Auburn, even though it was only 1 year in the SEC, it's one of the best years any SEC quarterback's ever had.
Might be the best, honestly.
It's right up there. I mean, it's him, it's Manziel, it's Burrow, it's Tebow. Like those are the ones that they're almost go back and look at the numbers, and it's like, oh my,
yeah,
they did that in the SEC.
Yeah.
LaNorris has a ways to go before he gets to where he's able to perform like Cam Newton did in 2010 at Auburn or Joe Burrow did in 2019 at LSU. Doesn't mean he can't get there, but like Cam had already played behind Tebow at Florida, under Urban at Florida in Gainesville, went to the Blinn Junior College Buccaneers for 2 years, lit it up there. And then he was like a finished product his final year at Auburn. Like, it was like, oh man, he just could do it all. That's what you're hoping LaNorris Sellers can turn into. He's already more shifty than Cam could ever be. Cam was just a battering ram running the ball.
Yep.
He wasn't the most like Andrew Luck had a better 40 time if you want to go back to that. But he was a beast. But he wasn't what I would call the most shifty guy in the world. LaNorris is different. LaNorris is more like Lamar Jackson when it comes to that. LaNorris is just there's nobody in college football next year at the quarterback spot that can move like LaNorris Sellers. That's undoubtable. But then what the scouts are going to say, yeah, we already know that. We've seen enough tape on that. Now show me you can be accurate as a passer. Show me you can make those tight throws. Show me at the end of the game with an open receiver, you're not going to miss him. You're not going to throw a dirt ball. Like that's what they're going to want to see and say, okay, now he's first round ready.
Mm-hmm.
And there's I certainly think it's in there. And if it is in there, then he's going to make a lot of money. I know Gamecock fans would love to see him for 2 more years, but obviously if he improves the way he's capable of improving, it's going to be really hard to convince him to stay for another year. Because if you got a first round grade as a quarterback, 9 times out of 10, you're gone.
Right.
You're not coming
well, exactly. And it's not like, back in the middle of the season, a lot of the comps, because LaNorris was just getting started as a starting quarterback. I mean, obviously he had started since game 1, but had the injury and then started playing a little bit better. And so you naturally, you start getting compared to your peers and you start, who does he remind you of, whatever. And do you remember in October when you would have those conversations, or others would have those conversations, you just listened in, you would hear some of the Jalen Milroe stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different scenario here, where I think Jalen Milroe had there at the time, it seemed like Jalen Milroe was probably going to be a first round pick.
Yeah, that was a compliment at the time.
Yeah.
Anybody that watched Jalen Milroe against Georgia, who's going to have like a half a dozen high defensive draft picks in this draft, Jalen Milroe put on an absolute display.
Right.
He would have been your Heisman winner if you voted the Monday after that game.
I know.
Boom. He's the guy. He was unreal. And so like from a running the ball standpoint, he's got the similar traits as LaNorris does. I mean, he's freaky good running the ball, but for whatever reason, he got worse and worse as a passer down the stretch. A lot of people are blaming Kalen DeBoer now, and if Nick Saban were there, Milroe would have been developed better, blah, blah, blah. Who knows? I mean, who knows? But, yeah, at the time, you would have loved to have been compared to Jalen Milroe.
Right.
He was on top of the damn world for a few weeks there, and it looked like he was only going to get better, and then downward spiral.
Totally. In 2 different scenarios, where LaNorris Sellers, if he is fringe first rounder, he will probably continue to move up draft boards. Jalen Milroe is falling off the face of the earth when it comes to this right now.